There's a lot not to like about Dragon Age the Veilguard so far, but I've got to say, the biggest positive from everything I've seen so far, it's certainly not anything BioWare have shown themselves. It's not the gameplay, the characters, the plot or anything, that's all pretty bad. The biggest positive has actually been the fan reaction, which was quite unexpected to me from everything we've seen in gaming in recent times. I've seen a lot in the past where you get a developer who is just way past it. They're past their prime. Everyone sort of expects them only to deliver duds from then on. But then they'll revive some old dormant IP that everyone just gets nostalgic about immediately. And suddenly hype builds. Everyone forgets about all the crap that this developer has delivered in the last decade or so, and they just get excited once again. Oh, don't worry about the dud they released last year or when they tried to borderline scam us the game before that. Just consume product. Get excited for this new one. Don't be toxic. I mean, an example could be Diablo 4, where Blizzard was genuinely at rock bottom. No one likes them. Diablo 4 trailer, everyone gets pumped. It sells really well, and then afterwards everyone's like, that game sucked. But it's like, it sold really well, so it tells them that they're actually doing a good job. We're just gonna get more of that crap. But for Dragon Age the Veilguard, that hasn't really happened. And maybe I'm just being too optimistic. Maybe because that reveal trailer, I think it was at, what was it? It's not E3 anymore. It was Summer Games Fest or something, where they released that initial character trailer. Like, no one liked that. Even the most optimistic bio drones, defenders, even they were shitting on that trailer, so maybe that's what did the damage. But I just feel like most people are being pretty sane with the Veilguard. They're not just fanboying, getting excited for absolutely no reason at all. It feels like the people who are positive about it, they're kind of 1 foot in, like, I want to get pumped for it, but I'm not just going to lose my mind just yet. I mean, I'm optimistic here, tentatively excited, that's about it. I feel like that's the sane group of positive people. And then there's a lot of people who very understandably are not excited at all. Everything they've seen looks very ordinary, from the combat to the pathetic looking characters, but it's also the track record. I think that matters. So you go back, obviously Anthem, borderline scam. They released that trailer at E3, which wasn't even a game, but they pretended it was. It was like a 3D animation of a game, and they presented it to us like it was real gameplay. It wasn't. They may have even been scamming EA, their bosses. So you can see just where the studio was, genuinely at rock bottom, and then the game itself unfinished, all of that. And I made a point at that time just to tell myself, one day, if they don't get closed down, they probably should have been, but they didn't get closed down, BioWare's still operating. I made a point to sort of say to myself, if they ever release another game, remember that moment. 6-7 years ago when Anthem came out, remember that moment, because that was their last effort, their last release. So no matter what they show you, that's who this studio currently is. This isn't the golden age of Knights of the Old Republic, original Baldur's Gate. Right now, the studio making the Veilguard is the Anthem studio, essentially, and they have to prove that that's not the case before I think anyone should be optimistic about it. But the narrative, BioWare's somewhat trying to change that, and they're trying to convince everyone it's all okay. They've been cooking. That's the phrase I see everywhere. Anytime I see they're cooking or something, I assume a bot is involved or there's some sort of propaganda going on. But BioWare seem to be trying to shift the narrative, and they're trying to pretend that the development of Dragon Age the Veilguard was very, very smooth, and that we should be extremely confident in everything that they're doing. It's normal for a game company to pretend, oh yes, this will be the best game ever. Of course they're going to say that, but just seeing them trying to pretend that the development journey of this game has been perfect, it's all going so smoothly, it's laughable because it simply isn't true. And the latest attempt at this is an article that's gone out. I think it may have even been an interview condensed into an article, but I'll read this part of it. So this is from a BioWare employee. We had other projects going on at BioWare as well, Epler says. We wanted to make sure we got this one right. The developer continues, calling the Veilguard the best version that the new Dragon Age could possibly be. What does that mean? Like, why would you even say that? Because what instance are you going to be like, nah, this is like the middling version of what it could have been. It could have been better, but this is what we're doing. Come on. Barlow then chimes in describing how she's been working on the game for 5 years now alongside its cast of actors. We started casting 5 years ago. The team, the talent, has been on this for 5 years. And according to Barlow, 5 years isn't that long, considering the amount of work the cast had to do. It takes a long time to record 700 characters, 80,000 lines, or 140,000 lines with all of the rooks. Now, these developers, they never learn, because they're still convinced that by telling us this is the biggest game ever with the most of everything, that guarantees in our heads it's going to be good. I think people have seen past that now. I reckon 10 years ago, that sounded great when Ubisoft would say, this Assassin's Creed is going to be twice the size, or Todd Howard with Starfield would tell you this game, Starfield, it's got 250,000 dialogue lines. That's 10 times the content than you got in Skyrim. Oh my god. And then you play the game and you realize, hang on, this is just bloated. This is now a quantity over quality situation, because even though it's much bigger, you had the same development time pretty much, the same size team, but apparently you've made 9 times the content. It only happens if you're copy and pasting everything around the map. So that's what I'd be expecting with something like this Dragon Age title. I highly doubt it's actually going to be that much bigger than our favorites and Origins or something like that. In fact, a lot of these lines, 80,000 lines, 70,000 might just be people telling you their preferred pronouns and then insulting you if you say the wrong thing, or you're not progressive enough in your dialogue choices, re-educating you, that sort of stuff. Definitely not convinced. And it's more for me, this is just generic marketing speak talking about, it's going to be great, the game's bigger and all of that. We've seen this a million times, but it's more the idea that the reason that this has taken 5+ years is because they've had to record a lot of dialogue. That is nonsense. We've never heard from another studio that the reason that game development takes so long now, half a decade, sometimes a full decade to get these games out, that the reason for it is there's a lot of voice acting work to be done. When has that come up? It's normally about art assets and how much more complicated that is compared to Nintendo 64 textures 20 years ago, for instance. And I can kind of buy that the art that goes on in games now is way more complicated, but to suggest the reason it's taken BioWare this long is so many lines for Rook, I don't believe that for a second. I think this is more about trying to change the narrative, which is that this game was in development hell. It literally was. That's the whole problem with the Veilguard, and one of the big reasons I haven't been excited for it. It is not true that when Anthem came out, I think early 2019, that since then they've been hard at work on a single-player Dragon Age game. That is absolutely not the case. First of all, as far as I know, Anthem comes out, it's a disaster, it's barely a full game because they really only made that in 12 months. Plenty of stories out there that go into depth, but essentially BioWare twiddled their thumbs for 5 years trying to figure it out, did nothing, tried to convince EA, their bosses, that they were doing good work, but they weren't. And then when it came down to crunch time that you need to get this done or there's going to be consequences, they hastily rushed something out, which is the Anthem that we got. After it releases, they spend time on it, and then they eventually move on to a live service, Dragon Age of some sort, and then it's all a bit of a mess. What EA probably realized, like a lot of other publishers out there, is that you can't just simply transition a single-player developer into a games-as-a-service one. Even though you see those dollar signs and you think that's going to be a path to easy money, doesn't actually work, because most of the developers, their experience is on single player. You can't just transition that into multiplayer overnight, which pretty much means you have to create a new studio. If you want BioWare delivering games as a service titles competently, you would have to change most of the developers. You'd have to fire a lot of the existing team and bring in new people. So it's kind of like opening a brand new studio. We saw that with Redfall, where a lot of the team there who made great immersive sim, then they're making freaking Redfall, which they were told has to be a live service. A lot of that team was gone and replaced. New people come in, and then you've got to relearn everything, and there's no guarantee that a brand new team that hasn't really worked together, people who haven't worked together before, it's no guarantee that they're going to gel well and produce something decent, because how many brand new studios failed to release even one good game. So if you have a team that is producing decent games in a genre that they know, it's probably safer to let them keep doing that. I still think that BioWare were kind of on the decline before Anthem, but I mean, Mass Effect 3 is obviously a big upgrade to Anthem, so it still would have been better if they continued along those lines. But you had that first iteration of Dragon Age 4, the multiplayer game that basically collapsed, and just to show you what I'm talking about, I mentioned that most people are pretty objective and they have one foot in maybe with excitement for the Veilguard, but they know it probably won't live up to expectations. However, you do have some people who are all in, totally coping, they think it's going to be the greatest thing of all time, and I'm on the Purple forum here for a reason, because that's where I figured I'd find those people. Those total copers, so it doesn't matter what they see with their own eyes, they've just convinced themselves it's going to be the greatest thing ever. If you don't agree, you are a racist. Those are the facts. And we can see one of those people here. So someone sensible mentions Dragon Age 4, it got rebooted twice. It was originally a co-op-centric game, then that died. It went through a smaller reboot the next year, where they axed the more open world and refocused the story. So it sounds like it was going to be multiplayer, then it was going to be open world, like Inquisition maybe, and then they moved to a more hub-style direction with missions, which I think overall is a good thing that they landed there eventually. I think those hubs and missions, that is BioWare's strength, but it seems like it was too late. Like, they've had so many iterations of this. I mean, there's no consistent vision. They certainly haven't spent 5 years in this direction. They might have only spent a couple, so is it going to feel a little bit rushed? We'll have to see, and this is where the Biodrone comes in. This is just not even remotely true. You're greatly exaggerating and misrepresenting the first reboot, and the second reboot you're claiming is completely fabricated, unless you have some insider knowledge that was never released to the public. Well, there's been a number of reports leaked suggesting that there have been multiple reboots of this game, and one of the more credible ones was one that said the latest iteration was going to be God of War-like action combat. And that turned out to be absolutely true. We've seen it in the latest trailer. We saw it in the very first leaked gameplay like a year ago as well. So that led me to believe that whoever leaked the idea of development hell, what was going on with these reboots, was probably true. Obviously not 100% confirmed, but I'll take that over this person who was just denying it, putting their fingers in their ears because they don't like it. They want to convince themselves that, no, the game, very smooth development. BioWare, it's a well-oiled machine. They'll never get anything wrong, even though they've shown us where they are with their most recent titles. They were just prototyping various ideas, as you do early in development, and all the while management was trying to convince EA to let them just make a purely single-player game, which they eventually did before the game ever went into full production. Now, this is just massive cope. The idea that BioWare were playing like 4D chess with EA. They were making a live service Dragon Age, prototyping it behind the scenes. But really, it was a big scheme and plan, because really they were going to convince them to let them make a single-player game. I don't believe that for a second. I really just think that EA, back in like 2019, 2020, around then, they were in full live service mode, but they thought every studio's gotta make live services. That's it. Single player is dead. CEO of EA said that themselves, that gamers apparently don't want single player anymore, and then reality hit, where it was like a bunch of live service from other teams failed, and then EA realized, well, hang on, if you go all in on live services, you're probably going to have too many failures. You at least need a balance. Decent single player and a few live services. I mean, even Sony have realized that. They were going all in on live service. Now they've backpedaled. I reckon Ubisoft have kind of done that as well. Quite a few have. And that's why BioWare were allowed to make this. EA realized BioWare, they're already losing us money, so let's at least let them make something that they might be competent at. If that sucks, we'll shut them down, but we'll give them one chance to do what they were traditionally good at. I'm not really convinced that BioWare convinced EA of anything, because BioWare had to be on thin ice and just taking orders, because like they'd lost all credibility after Andromeda, after Anthem. Surely thin ice, and they were just doing what EA said they were allowed to do, basically. But we'll end here. I'm on another forum now, because again, it seems like most people are pretty sensible with the Veilguard. Not that many people are genuinely excited. And it really seems like the bots are out in full force. The only one excited about this is robots, essentially. BioWare programmed, EA programmed, trying to just shift that narrative. Like the whole article where it's talking about, oh, it's going to be so big, the game's taken 5 years because we're recording so many lines. Don't worry, BioWare cooking, everything's going to be fantastic. I think it's all bots trying to generate this enthusiasm. Someone's compiled all the Reddit comments that are positive, and you just read them, and it's like, this cannot be human. From everything we've seen and heard so far, it's been obvious to me that everyone working on the game has a genuine love for Dragon Age as a whole. They've got a love for something. I don't think it's Dragon Age. It seems to be one side of the political spectrum. That's what they come together on. But in terms of just quality, respecting Dragon Age, I haven't quite seen that. Yeah, this is honestly one of those times where I went from having no idea when or what the game would be like to absolutely every new bit of news making me more excited for it. May not be the direction everyone was hoping for, but nothing ever will be. And this direction looks extremely my jam. And I'm very happy to see more of that sentiment growing! Exclamation mark, totally human. Definitely humans excited for Dragon Age the Veilguard. We may even get a release date soon. Let's see what happens. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.